Right, Deputy Minister, let me start with you. We are talking at a global mobility conference. How do you think South Africa can leverage global mobility to attract more foreign investment?
I think that when you look at the need for skilled people to enter the economy and the fact that we do have a sophisticated services economy in so many parts, that we should be an attractive destination for skilled people to come in. And of course, that has positive spin-off effects for our domestic economy. And we can leverage that. And some of the reforms we're seeing at Home Affairs to make it easier for people to acquire visas, get into the country, apply their skills here, is backing the global trend as well. I think the confluence of the fact that we've got the sophisticated services economy and that we are making it easier to get skilled people into the country will help us to become more attractive in that sense.
Making it easier, but not easy enough, though. Easier enough.
Everything could always, of course, be easier. And we know that of the many countries that the IMF tracks, I think 49 now, that we are still the 49th when it comes to ease of doing business. And certainly that there is a need for lots of deep-seated regulatory reform to get there. If we could just be average on ease of doing business globally, I think that would help. We don't need to be the best, the most competitive. We just need to get to the global average. And I think that would be a game changer if we could ease up those constraints.
You travel widely in Africa. Is there an appetite for investment that you see?
Yes, I think there's a global shift from aid to trade. And I think that while it has its risks, it also opens up all sorts of new opportunities. I think we mustn't be blind to those opportunities and the fact that lots of countries are looking for investment opportunities into Africa now, in place of what there used to be the aid system, looking at the trade system, and wondering how they can find business opportunities across the continent. And I have met American businessmen and parts of the continent you would never anticipate meeting. And what that tells me is that there is an appetite, and the appetite is going to be big. Capital always looks for return on investments. And with a young, growing population, if we can pull the right levers, as I always say, and get the right reforms in, I think that we can take advantage of this moment.
And predicated, Professor Engel, on the right to tax regime.
Yes, a good tax regime helps. You don't want one that's oppressive or too complicated. But to be fair to our tax system, I think our tax system is fairly reasonable. Yes, you can improve it a little bit on the corporate side. But overall, if you look at tax systems around the world, we do have, when it comes to the policy system itself, is quite fine. I think the problem is there's pressure on revenue in the background. So, you can put whatever system you want in, but all the people who are making the analysis will worry, when will the rates increase? And that becomes a problem. The other one that's...
Well, how do you find the balance there?
Well, how do you find the balance? I guess the problem here was like on the whole debate on the VAT issue. The debate on the VAT issue wasn't really a debate there. The really debate was on the expenditure side. The VAT just was an easy way to hook it. The problem is your expenditure is too high for this country to sustain. Or you've got to make it more efficient what you're doing. But tax is not the number one lever for people. You want a stable regime, maybe you can make it a little bit lower and so forth. But really the problem that comes is you've got the pressure in the background, and we've been fairly good, but the rest of Africa has not. And that is, one is you need to have a revenue service that's reasonable, that's not just throwing out random audits. And you'll see it in Africa. They can be very random. They see the foreign investors are the only ones who have money, and the audit, they forget the law. They just randomly audit. And taxpayer rights become very important. Now, in South Africa, the problem isn't as severe, but there is a feeling and a concern about taxpayer rights. And what that does is you can have any law you want, but investors want super certainty that they're not going to have surprises. And there are a lot of rules designed to get the evaders, but those rules at some point accidentally slip over to the people who've made any mistakes or so forth. And if you're an in-house tax director, you don't want to have unexpected losses. Better to pay a higher rate than one that's jumping like that.
But it is a question of balance, because the deputy governor of SARS saying yesterday that we have 513 billion rand in unpaid tax when it comes to PAYE and value-added tax.
Yeah, we have a lot of tax that's unpaid, which is another issue. That what you're busy doing is assessing, but not collecting. Now, some of that is a lot of old debts that really should be written off. But it's also a way of saying that maybe you can have as many theoretical rates as you want, but if the money isn't there, the money isn't there. But yes, they're pushing very hard to get some of that. But again, there's a point where people are at a breaking point, and that's more at a local level.
Deputy Minister, in your keynote speech, you spoke about the importance of efficiency, something that Professor Engel has already referred to, and particularly at local government level. I get it, but we're not there yet, are we? In fact, we're a long way off it.
No, absolutely. I think that the reality is that our municipalities, many of them, are in the kind of death spiral that resembles a utility death spiral, much like we saw at ESCOM over the last couple of years. And that death spiral, where you've got rising expenditure and lower revenue, and you cannot collect revenue at that level, is leading to what begins to resemble systemic collapse. So turning that around is going to be absolutely critical. And it is going to be critical for the vitality of the economy, and also critical when it gets back to tax. For taxpayers to feel that their taxes are worth paying. I mean, the quickest way to make people feel that not begrudge their taxes is if their services work. And if you wake up every morning and there are potholes on your street lights don't work, your refuse hasn't been collected, and your water's out, you're going to be resentful not just of the local system, but of the entire tax system. And that's why it's so absolutely critical that we turn it around. There are some programs we put into place. The Metro Trading Services reform is a big one for the big cities. There are various interventions in place as well, and so on. But we've also got to get the leadership right. And if we can get the leadership right and get the right political will into our local government system, I think that can resolve a lot of these problems.
Just a final question to you both. I'm hearing a lot of if we and we should do this. But are we broadly, as a group of two here, are we broadly optimistic that we're on the right road?
I think there's a good push on the right road. The question is, can we get the obstacles, the political obstacles, out of the way? And there's a certain group of people that are entrenched in a certain line of thinking. And I know that they say they're cracking a little. I'm not so confident. The real question is that change going to come? It's all doable. And it's not like you said, you don't have to be the top of the class. But if there's a certain group that consistently blocks you and you can't move them out of the way, that's the real question.
And that success, Deputy Minister, is predicated on the government of national unity and it surviving in its current form.
Yes, absolutely. If we can see through, we've started some of the critical programs, the RFIs on transmission infrastructure to get the private sector to build, which will help resolve some of our energy constraints. The port and freight rail RFIs, which is now helping to bring the private sector, and we'll go to RFPs there next. That would begin to break down some of the obstacles if we can see it through. But that, of course, would require the government of national unity to go the distance. I am hopeful that it can. And if we can see through this reform program at the end of the term, the green shoot suddenly would see a massive acceleration in the growth trajectory and take us out of the low growth trap that we're in. So it's absolutely critical that we do what we can to keep it together to see through some of these reforms.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.